Hi everyone, my name is Susan and thank you for coming to Online Storytime. Today we have great books and the theme is Heartwarming Holidays because this time of year we think a lot about Santa and what presents we're going to get and all that kind of stuff, but there's a deeper meaning to this time of year. And these books reflect that. And I think you're going to love them. It's going to make you feel all good inside. And so just sit back and enjoy. First, we're going to sing a little song. I'll sing it first, and then you can join me afterwards, okay? It goes like this. Dance like snowflakes in the air, in the air. Whirling, twirling snowflakes, whirling, twirling snowflakes here and there, here and there. Let's try it again and do it really loud so I can hear you all the way up here at the library. Dance like snowflakes in the air, in the air. Whirling, twirling snowflakes here and there, here and there. That's hard to say. Whirling, twirling snowflakes. Try to say that 10 times fast. That's hard. Okay, I'm going to go right into the first book. It's called The Last Christmas Tree. And this is by Stephen Krinsky. And I haven't read this book before this year, and I just love this one. It's going to be a classic. Almost exactly a month before Christmas, the trees arrived for the holiday. On the day before, the lot had been empty. Now it was full to bursting. The difference was almost like magic. There were balsam firs and spruces and pines all lined up neatly at a slight angle. But in the middle of one row, wedged between two bushier companions, one particular tree trembled with excitement. It was not very tall, and in truth, a bit hunched over, not to mention the branches that were missing here and there. Still, no tree was more filled with the spirit of the season. Surely everyone would see that. See a little tree right there? The little tree could hardly wait to get picked. What a moment that would be! It imagined itself covered with lights and ornaments, with presents tucked snugly underneath. The other trees didn't seem to care about who picked them or how long it took, but the little tree kept its hopes high. It wanted someone special, someone who was excited about Christmas as it was. As the days passed, the trees were sold one by one. A few people made up their minds in an instant. They knew what they wanted, and that was that. Others went back and forth for what seemed like hours, and it sometimes was. One family pulled out the little tree for a closer look, but they were laughing meanly and shaking their heads the whole time. The little tree was secretly glad when they left it behind. As time went on, the remaining trees were spread out, the better to show themselves off. No longer hemmed in, the little tree tried to stand up straight and puff itself out as much as possible, but no one seemed to notice. The lot just got emptier and emptier. The few unsold trees found their prices marked down again and again and again. On Christmas Eve, the little tree looked to the left and looked to the right. It was all alone. A sign was hung on it in big letters. It wasn't an ornament, not really, but the tree chose to think otherwise. It says free. The night was cold and clear, and the little tree got rather stir. The next thing the tree knew, it was gently picked up and placed in an empty sack. This wasn't what the tree had expected at all. Then the earth fell away. Far below, the other trees were covered in all of their finery. The little tree had no idea where it was going or how long the journey would be. But when it arrived at last, the little Christmas tree was finally home. There it is. So Santa picked that tree for his own special tree. How nice is that? Do you have a tree yet this year? Did your family go pick it out together? Did you pick it because it was big, because it was small? What kind of criteria did you use? Do you think that you would have picked this little Christmas tree? I'm not sure. I'm glad Santa took it though. Now it's going to have a great Christmas. Okay, the next book, instead of saving my favorite book for last, I'm doing it second. This is absolute my favorite book. It's really beautiful. I think you'll like it. It's called Great Joy. It's by Kate DiCamillo. The week before Christmas, a monkey appeared on the corner of 5th and Vine. He was wearing a green vest and a red hat. And with him was a man, an organ grinder, who played music for the people on the street. In the daytime, when the sun shone, the sequins on the monkey's vest glittered and flashed. And from the window of her apartment, Frances could see the tin cup he held out to the people who walked by. Sometimes, if it was very quiet for just a minute, she could hear the music. It came across the crowded sidewalk and up through the windows, and even through the organ grinder and the monkey were just across the street. The song sounded sad and far away, like the music from a dream. Where do they go at night? Frances asked. Who? Asked her mother. The man and his monkey. Oh, Frances, said her mother, don't ask me questions that I can't answer. I'm sure they go somewhere. Everyone goes somewhere. But where? Said Frances. I have no idea, said her mother. Turn around. Frances turned. Her mother pinned the bottom of her robe. There, said her mother. Now all I have to do is hymn it, and you'll be ready. Have you memorized your line? Yes, said Frances. Are you excited about the pageant? Yes, said Frances. And she turned away from her mother and looked out the window at the monkey. That night, Frances made herself stay awake. She hummed songs, and she set her multiplication tables, and she named the capitals of each state, St. Paul, Tallahassee, Harrisburg, one after another. Every time she felt as she might fall asleep, she shook her head and pinched her arm and opened her eyes wide. Finally, after midnight, Frances got out of bed and crept down the hallway to the living room. She looked down into the street. She saw the organ grinder, but where was the monkey? Her heart thumped, and then she saw him, tucked inside the man's overcoat, his small red hat still on his head. Look at me, Frances whispered. Look up here. But it was the organ grinder who looked up. He took his cap from his head and he raised it to her. They sleep on the street, Frances said the next morning, even when it snows. Oh, Frances, said her mother, maybe they could come for dinner? No, they can't come to dinner, said her mother. Why not? They're strangers, that's why. Eat your breakfast, Frances. You've got a big day ahead of you. All that day it snowed, but by evening, in time for the pageant, the sky cleared. The snow was so deep that Frances had to wear her boots for the walk to the church. The organ grinder and the monkey were still on their corner. Frances ran up and put a nickel in the monkey's cup. I'm going to be in the Christmas play tonight, she said. I get to wear wings and I have one line to say. Do you want to hear it? "Francis," her mother said, "we're going to be late. Let's go." "You can come," Francis said, turning back. "The play's at the church. It's just down the street. You can both come." The organ grinder smiled at her, but his eyes looked sad. At the church, everyone else was already in costume. "Hurry," the choir director said as he helped Frances put on her wings. The shepherds walked out first, and then the choir director pointed to Frances. "Now," he whispered. Frances stood very still. She opened her mouth, but the words would not come. "Say it," whispered one of the shepherds. "Say it," hissed an angel who didn't have any lines of her own. The camel, which was really two people, swayed nervously back and forth. But Frances couldn't speak. All she could think about was how cold it was outside and how sad the organ grinder's eyes were, even when he smiled. The world was quiet, and everyone waited. Then, in the back of the sanctuary, a door opened. Frances smiled. "Behold," she shouted, "I bring you tidings of great joy." And because the words felt so right, Frances said them again. Great joy. And there they are after the pageant. Do you see the organ grinder? It's right there. And do you see the monkey? Look really close. Took me a while to find him. He's right there on that boy's shoulder. So there you have it. Did you like that book? It was quite beautiful, I thought. And I like any books with monkeys. Who doesn't? Who doesn't like a monkey? Monkeys at Christmas. Okay. The next book I have is called Santa's Book of Names. I think this is where he puts all of our names. And there's a list, a naughty list, and a nice list. Let's find out more about this book of names. It is by David McPhail. Edward was good at numbers. He could count all the way to 50. He could recite the alphabet and knew the names of most of the dinosaurs, but when he opened a book and tried to read it, he just couldn't. Edward's teacher was concerned. She sent a note to Edward's mother and father urging that he be tested to find out what the problem was. "No tests," Edward's mother wrote back. "Patience." At bedtime on Christmas Eve, Edward's father read aloud Edward's favorite Christmas story. In the story, Santa Claus delivers presents to boys and girls around the world. "How does Santa Claus remember the names of all the boys and girls he gives presents to?" Edward asked when his father had finished. "And where they live, and what toys to bring them?" "He must have a good memory," said Edward's father. "Or maybe he has it all written down in a book," said Edward's mother as she came in to say goodnight. After his mother and father had kissed him and turned off the light, Edward took out his flashlight from under this pillow and tried to read the story himself. He wanted more than anything to be able to read, and he almost could. Almost, but not quite. Just as he turned the last page, Edward heard a noise. He sat up and he listened. Yes, there it was again. Edward slid out of bed and tiptoed downstairs. When he peeked into the living room, he saw that his stocking was filled and that there were presents under the tree. Santa had come and gone, and Edward had missed him. Then Edward noticed something else, something lying on the floor right in front of the fireplace. It was a book. He bent down and picked it up. The book was thick and heavy and probably very, very old, for the cover was worn and the pages were tattered. Santa must have dropped it, Edward suddenly realized. He ran to the front door, threw it open, and stepped outside. Just as he did, a long shadow passed over him, and it glided across the fresh moonlit snow. "Santa, wait!" cried Edward. "You forgot your book." But in the jingle of sleigh bells and the rush of the wind, Santa didn't hear, and in an instant he was gone. How far could Santa get without his book, Edward wondered. And when Santa realized the book was missing, how would he know where to find it? Then Edward had an idea. He hurried back into the house and quickly put on his boots and mittens and coat and hat. He knew what letter the word book started with, so he tromped out a huge B in the snow. Would Santa see it? And even if he did, would he know what it meant? Then Edward heard the sound of sleigh bells growing closer. He looked up. High overhead, Santa's sleigh appeared. It circled once and then went into a steep dive, gliding to a stop right beside Edward. Hello, Edward. I see that you found my book, said Santa, who looked very much like Santa in Edward's storybook, except his nose wasn't round. It was pointed. That book contains the names and addresses of all the children in the world, Santa explained. Most of them I know by heart, but I can't always remember which present to leave. That's why I need my book. Edward held the book out to Santa. Thank you, Edward, said Santa, and he gently patted Edward's shoulder. It'd be a big help if you'd come along and read it to me when I forget something. Ride with Santa in his sleigh? Edward couldn't believe his ears. He stared down at the glistening snow. I can't help you, Santa, he stammered. I can't read. Come along anyway. You can hold the book open so the pages don't blow, said Santa. I promise I'll have you back before dawn. Edward smiled. Okay, and he jumped into the sleigh beside Santa, who bundled him up in thick woolen robes and placed the open book in his lap. Then Santa gave a low whistle, and the reindeer lunged forward, lifting the sleigh into the crisp, clear air. From rooftop to rooftop they went. At each stop, Santa would disappear down the chimney with a small bag full of toys. Presently, they came to a great city. Skyscrapers, dark and silent, loomed around and above them as Santa made his way from one apartment house to the next. 1 million children must live in the city, thought Edward, and Santa delivers toys to every one of them. How he did it, Edward couldn't say. Does time slow down, he wondered, or even stop on Christmas Eve while Santa goes about his work? On they went to other cities and to every town and village in between. I'll go wherever there's a child, Santa said. All this time, Edward had been holding the book and turning the pages so Santa, his glasses balanced on the end of his nose, could glance over and read what was written beside each name. He read aloud, Pablo Lopez, paint set, and Lucy Wells, baseball mitt, as Edward followed along. They were crossing a vast ocean, skimming the waves, when a huge sea wind flew in front of them. As they passed the bird, the tip of his wing brushed Santa's glasses and sent them spinning. Down, down the glasses fell, until with a faint splash, they entered the dark sea and disappeared. Oh dear, Santa exclaimed. No, I really need your help, Edward. Do you think you can read the words to me? Edward knew Santa was counting on him. I'll try, he said. Good, said Santa. I was up to the seventh name on that page, Ben Hill. Edward counted down the page to number 7. Beside the name was a word that looked familiar to him. Edward began. That's right, Santa said. Just sound it out. Book. Book. A book it is then, declared Santa, and he handed the sleigh and stepped out. What's next, Edward? Santa asked upon his return. Edward looked up at Santa. The doll, he said proudly. And after that, Edward continued to read the words to Santa. And while Santa was delivering one present, Edward was getting another one ready to go. Finally, they were finished. Edward closed the book of names and placed it on the seat beside him as Santa emerged from the last chimney and took one final present from his bag. It was a book. "Merry Christmas," said Santa, and he handed the book to Edward. "Thank you for all your help. I couldn't have done it without you." Then he took up the reins once more, and in an instant they were streaking through the dawning sky. Edward opened his book to the first page and stared down at the words. He must have fallen asleep on the way home, because the next thing he knew, his mother was gently shaking him and softly calling his name. "Merry Christmas, Edward," she whispered. "Time to wake up and see what Santa Claus has brought you." Edward opened his eyes. He was lying on the sofa in front of the fireplace. "Look what Santa left you," said Edward's father as he bent down and picked up a book. "Would you like me to read it to you?" Edward smiled. "No thanks, Dad," he replied. "Let me read it to you." And he did. The end. That was a nice book, wasn't it? Wouldn't it be fun to get in the sleigh and go flying through the sky with Santa and reading him the list? How cool would that be? And then when you saw your friends after Christmas, they'd be all, "Well, I got," and then you could just tell them what I got because you knew, because you had the book right there. And they would be shocked and wouldn't know how you knew. The next song I have is called "Ring the Bells." I can read it, sing. I'm going to attempt to sing it, and you can sing it along with me. It's to the tune of "Row, Row, Row Your Boat." Ring, ring, ring the bells, ring them loud and clear, to say to people everywhere that Christmas time is here. Let's try it one more time. Ring, ring, ring the bells, ring them loud and clear, to say to people everywhere that Christmas time is here. Do you know how many more days it is till Christmas? I'll give you a few minutes to think. Every day I mark it off on the calendar. So I know today we have 16 more days just around the corner. And then Santa will be here. Yay! Do any of you have dogs, or do you like dogs? Do you think about dogs during Christmas? I told you that other book was my favorite. Maybe I lied. This book may actually be my favorite. It's called Claude the Dog. It's a cute dog. It's a beautiful little story. I think you'll enjoy it. Claude the Dog, A Christmas Story. "Merry Christmas, Claude. We didn't forget you, see? Here's a dog pillow from Mama and a dog blanket from Papa and a rubber mouse from me. That's all. Be a good dog, Claude." Does he look happy, all bundled up there on his new bed under a new blanket, and he's got his little mouse toy right there. Then along came Bummer. He had no home. "Look at all my presents, Bummer." "My, you're a lucky dog, Claude." "See my soft pillow, Bummer?" "Never saw a pillow, Claude. I sleep on the hard ground." "Here, you take my pillow, Claude." "No, you take my pillow, Bummer." "Oh, thank you, Claude." "See my nice warm blanket, Bummer?" "Never saw a blanket, Claude. My nights are very cold." "Then you take my blanket, Bummer." "Thank you, Claude." "See my toy? It's a rubber mouse, Bummer." "Never had a toy, Claude. Sometimes I get very lonely." "Then take my rubber mouse to keep you company, Bummer." "But you have no presents left, Claude." My best present is at home, Bummer. You've made me so happy, Claude. I wish you a very Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas to you, Bummer. Thump. And then he runs to the door. Crunch. He jumps on his boy. Slurp. Now he's giving him doggy kisses. We love you, Claude. So he didn't feel bad at all giving all this nice presents away to Bummer, the homeless dog, because he had a family. And that's all he needed for Christmas was his family, the love of his family. So that's something that we should all remember this time of year. It's not about the things. It's about the special people around us. So be sure to go up to your grandmother and your grandfather and your mom and dad and your brothers and sisters and all of your great friends and just let them know how much you care about them, okay? So that brings us to the end of our time. So we'll see you next week with another great story time online. Thank you very much for joining us. Bye.